in reducing food insecurity, improving nutrition, reducing poverty, and SNAP's effect on employment. My testimony today covers 3 main points. First, SNAP helps families meet their food needs, but it also discourages work and makes upward mobility more challenging. Second, in recent years, SNAP has grown regardless of economic conditions, remaining at or near historically high levels even when unemployment rates are low. And third, policymakers can focus on 2 key areas to strengthen employment through SNAP: work requirements and benefit cliffs. For context, among more than 41 million people who receive SNAP in the average month, almost 15 million are non-disabled working-age adults. This constitutes 58% of the adult SNAP caseload. According to program data, only between 25 and 50% of these adults work while receiving SNAP. Other analysis may place these rates higher, but much of that is based on survey data and includes employment when the households are not receiving SNAP. To be fair, SNAP serves low-income households, meaning we would expect work rates to be lower than the general population because job loss often causes households to need and enroll in SNAP. This is why SNAP has historically been considered a countercyclical program, increasing when the economy struggles and decreasing when the economy recovers. However, in my research, I've documented that SNAP is only partly countercyclical. Relative to the population, SNAP's caseload tends to grow when the unemployment rate rises and remains elevated even when the unemployment rate conditions improve. While policy changes explain some of these caseload dynamics, work disincentives likely play a role. Research on the rollout of the food stamp program in the 1970s found that the availability of benefits reduced employment in a small but meaningful way. While it is important to consider the positive aspects of SNAP, such as reducing food insecurity, it is equally important to acknowledge these negative employment effects. Work requirements can help mitigate work disincentives. Currently, SNAP adult recipients who are not disabled, age 18 to 54, and without dependents, what we call ABODs, can only receive SNAP for 3 months in a 3-year period unless they work or participate in a work-like activity. Research on the effectiveness of these work requirements have been mixed. Studies find that work requirements reduce SNAP receipt, but the effects on employment levels are less clear. The lack of consensus on the effectiveness of ABOD work requirements stems from multiple conflicting and complicating factors, including data and methodological limitations. The effectiveness of work requirements is also complicated by the ability of states to waive this requirement. Current federal regulations allow waivers even when economic conditions are relatively strong. For example, in 2019, a very strong economy, California was able to waive 52 of 58 counties even when the average unemployment rate among those counties was 5.5%. In a recent study, my co-authors and I modeled rule changes proposed in 2019 to tighten the ABOD waiver rules. We found that those regulatory changes would have resulted in stronger responsiveness to unemployment conditions and better targeting. Another way SNAP negatively affects employment is when additional earnings result in a loss of benefits that fully or partly offset. We call the most extreme case of this a benefit cliff, when 100% of new earnings is lost to benefit reductions. Currently, SNAP has a benefit cliff problem. The benefit cliffs create large work disincentives for households receiving benefits. And losing a large share of new earnings to benefit losses can be demoralizing for families seeking to improve their employment situation. Congress can strengthen the relationship between SNAP and employment by improving SNAP's work requirements and addressing these benefit cliffs. Thank you, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Rashidi. Mr. Schaefer, please begin when you're ready.
Good morning, Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on the value of SNAP Employment and Training, or SNAP E&T, and how nutrition benefits, coupled with job training, can address short-term hunger, long-term self-sufficiency, and stimulate the economy. My name is Sam Schaefer, and I lead the Center for Employment Opportunities, CEO, which provides jobs for individuals returning from incarceration. In 30 cities across 12 states, CEO guarantees immediate daily pay and advanced training to help every participant get a quality, full-time job. Last year, after release, more than 8,000 motivated people chose to walk through a CEO front door in states like Oklahoma, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and North Carolina. It's a time of hope and renewal. Yet most people will have difficulty covering the costs of basic needs, such as food and shelter. Add on expenses for transportation, new clothes for job interviews, and it's virtually impossible to achieve long-term stability without some support. Recognizing this gap and the need for high-quality training, the 2018 Farm Bill allowed paid training opportunities in SNAP E&T. This new provision benefits the people we serve at CEO, along with thousands more struggling financially. It means people can receive SNAP and also take part in a paid apprenticeship or transitional job to hone their skills. Those food benefits offer a lifeline, while E&T services build a bridge to lasting independence. This approach works. Independent evaluations show that CEO participants are 48% more likely to be employed after 3 years. That's why, working with Red F and SJI, CEO has helped train 97 organizations on E&T, serving an estimated 10,000 individuals. When we provide pathways to employment, we improve public safety and add to our economy. Today, we ask the committee to include 2 bipartisan fixes to strengthen E&T. The first is the Bipartisan Training and Nutrition Stability Act to ensure E&T operates as Congress intended. As people engage in paid E&T, their SNAP benefits quickly shrink and often disappear altogether. This leaves them vulnerable before a full-time job begins. There are thousands of people in workforce programs who are at risk of losing SNAP E&T due to the temporary income from the E&T program, an unintended consequence of the 2018 change. The Training and Nutrition Stability Act would fix this. Second, the Bipartisan Restore Act would ensure individuals with felony drug convictions are eligible for SNAP and E&T. North Carolina Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform and the Drug Policy Alliance report that removing this ban can break cycles of incarceration. This is supported by CEO's experience. One former participant, Yasmin, relayed that even though she was committed to turning her life around, it was difficult to pursue employment at CEO without SNAP access. These bipartisan solutions are vital to the program's effectiveness. We thank the chair and members of the committee for including both of these policies last Congress and respectfully urge you to pass a comprehensive bipartisan farm bill this Congress with these 2 fixes. With that, I yield the rest of my time to my colleague, William.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is William Lewis. I'm a senior site supervisor at the Center for Employment Opportunities, where I lead participants from our Detroit and Pontiac offices through transitional job training opportunities. However, my journey with CEO did not begin as staff. I started as a participant. After serving over 20 years in prison, I came home determined and hopeful, but without any clear idea of how to obtain vital necessities like a home, a job, and a chance to start over. Thankfully, with the support of my family, access to SNAP benefits, and the strong employment and training program at CEO, I found what I was missing and the path to a great career. But because of how the E&T program is currently written, the $64 a day that I earned as a participant in CEO's training program required that my SNAP benefits be cut by more than half. Consequently, I was forced to struggle that much harder every day to make ends meet and hope that my CEO training and hard work would pay off in the long run. Thankfully, it did. Nevertheless, what happened to me is not unique. Almost everyone who participates in a paid SNAP E&T training program, like CEOs, while receiving SNAP benefits, will face the same challenge I did. If you remember one thing about our participants, know that if asked, they'll say that SNAP and paid training are among the most important tools they have in their reentry journey. It's hard to name any 2 programs that, when combined, are a more efficient use of government funds. With that, thank you to the members of the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Schaefer and Mr. Lewis. Dr. Schanzenbach, please begin when you're ready.
Thank you. Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee, thank you for inviting me to testify at this hearing on SNAP. My name is Diane Schanzenbach. I'm a professor at Northwestern University, and for more than 2 decades, I've conducted and published many peer-reviewed studies on SNAP. Now, as a labor economist, I'm deeply concerned about the long-term decline in our nation's employment rate. Improving employment and job opportunities is a goal that we all share. However, increasing SNAP mandatory work requirements will not improve employment outcomes. Now, SNAP has 3 types of work requirements or work tests. The first is the general SNAP work requirement that applies to most SNAP participants unless they meet exemptions such as people with disabilities. These requirements include accepting a suitable job offer, not quitting or voluntarily reducing your weekly hours below 30. Now, second, states create SNAP employment and training programs. These can be compulsory and result in the loss of food benefits if individuals don't comply, or they can be offered to individuals who want to participate. Most states don't have enough E&T slots and therefore target their programming on individuals and services that are of high priority to the state. There's a third work requirement that applies to these able-bodied adults without dependents, or ABODs, ages 18 to 54. Those subject to the ABOD work requirements lose their SNAP benefits if they're not working at least 20 hours per week. Research evidence finds that work requirements for ABODs are not effective at improving employment outcomes. Now, SNAP can serve to identify and connect those in need of career assistance to help, but this should be done in a way that preserves their access to food support. There have been several recent high-quality studies of the impacts of work requirements using comprehensive administrative data. I summarize these in my written testimony. The new studies find that SNAP work requirements have no positive impact on work-related outcomes as measured by employment or earnings or hours worked. Now, on the other hand, they substantially reduce the likelihood that an individual receives SNAP. Why? Because SNAP work requirements do not address the problems these individuals face in obtaining stable employment. They often have limited education, health problems, and other challenges that make it difficult for them to find and consistently maintain 20 hours a week of employment. Taking away their food benefits makes these challenges worse, not better. SNAP participants generally work low-wage jobs in occupations with high unemployment rates, volatile hours, and common job displacements. These jobs have not seen much wage growth in recent decades and don't tend to lead to a career ladder with higher future earnings. Now, studies show that immediately prior to applying for SNAP, applicants have generally experienced a sharp decrease in their incomes. In other words, they apply for SNAP precisely because they've experienced an economic shock, like a job loss or a change in their family composition. SNAP helps them get back on their feet. New evidence finds that within a year, SNAP recipients are more likely to be employed and have higher earnings than they would have had without help from the program. The low-wage labor market is unstable. You might even call it broken. But SNAP did not cause this, and SNAP cannot fix it. Instead, SNAP helps soften the blow when workers in the low-wage sector see their hours cut back or they lose their jobs. When facing both the work requirement and the reality of their job markets, many SNAP recipients simply cannot meet the stringent work requirements due to the nature of their jobs, not due to a shortcoming of their own efforts. Unfortunately, the system's set up so that if they miss the employment goal for 3 months, they'll be barred from receiving SNAP for the next 3 years. Now imagine the harmful consequences if such an approach were extended to families with children. This policy is not effective for those currently facing SNAP work requirements, and expanding it to cover more SNAP participants would harm even more people, including children. Now, I also have grave concerns about policies that would require a state match for SNAP benefits. This would fundamentally undermine SNAP's power as an economic stabilizer during recessions. Now, at this moment, as many analysts are predicting an increasing likelihood of a recession in the coming months, we should be shoring up our tools to fight recessions, not undercutting them. This includes serious considerations of a SNAP work requirement suspension. Now, SNAP is highly efficient, it's effective, and is targeted to families who need the benefits the most. It reduces the likelihood that families have trouble affording food and serves as a crucial automatic fiscal stabilizer in times of economic downturns. We should preserve these features. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Schanzenbach. And now, Mr. Tidwell, please begin when you're ready.
Chairman Thompson, Ranking Member Craig, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today about the role of SNAP employment and training in breaking the cycle of poverty and creating pathways to long-term self-sufficiency. I am David Tidwell, President and CEO of Hope Ministries in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Hope Ministries is dedicated to preventing homelessness and promoting self-sufficiency and dignity through workforce development, financial coaching, and employment readiness programs. Every day, we work with individuals who face significant barriers that SNAP ENT helps them overcome. The need for robust employment and training programs is urgent. Louisiana has one of the highest rates of SNAP participation in the nation, with nearly 20% of our state's population relying on the program. In East Baton Rouge Parish alone, over 84,000 people, almost 1 in 5, receive SNAP benefits. Many of these individuals are eager to work, but they are stuck in a system where low-wage, unstable jobs prevent them from achieving financial independence. Without access to the critical services that SNAP ENT provides, they remain trapped in a cycle of poverty. That is why SNAP ENT is so important. It provides a bridge from public assistance to financial independence. The return on investment is clear. When individuals gain skills in high-demand industries, they move into higher-paying, sustainable careers. We recognize that workforce training alone isn't enough. People need a comprehensive support system to succeed. That is why we developed Skilled BR, an integrated workforce development platform that connects job seekers, training providers, and employers. Instead of working in silos, we coordinate services across multiple organizations, ensuring that individuals can seamlessly access education, career training, and direct employment opportunities. This approach bridges the skills gap and creates a pipeline of career-ready workers. A key component of our work in assisting SNAP recipients to obtain certifications in high-demand fields, such as commercial driver's license, medical training and certifications, and the skilled trades in manufacturing. Without SNAP ENT funding, these life-changing opportunities would be out of reach for many families. Continued investment in SNAP ENT is critical. I urge you to take the following actions to strengthen and expand this vital program. Increase funding for participant support services. Strengthen investments in industry-recognized certifications and apprenticeships. Support partnerships with faith-based and community organizations which play a crucial role in reaching marginalized populations. We have seen incredible success stories that demonstrate the effectiveness of SNAP ENT. Struggling to find steady employment, Tasha turned to SNAP ENT for support and a chance to change her future. She gained the skills needed to enter the banking industry. Today, she is employed with a major banking institution, earning a stable income and no longer relying on public assistance. After incarceration, Gary was determined to rebuild a stable future. With tuition assistance from SNAP ENT, he completed his CDL training, and now he is creating a fresh start for himself. In conclusion, SNAP ENT is not just an employment program. It is a lifeline that transforms individuals, stabilizes families, and strengthens communities. It is an investment in economic mobility, workforce development, and family futures. By expanding and strengthening this program, we can ensure that every SNAP participant has the opportunity to break free from poverty and build a better future. Thank you for your time and for your commitment to expanding opportunities for all Americans. I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tidwell. Thanks to all of our witnesses for your testimony. You'd be all to be commended, too. You were at or under the 5-minute, which is a great example for the rest of us to follow here as we go forward, so we can get as many questions in as possible. At this time, members will be recognized for questions in order of seniority, alternating between majority and minority members, and in order of arrival for those who joined us after the hearing convened. You'll be recognized for 5 minutes each in order to allow us to get to as many questions as possible. I recognize myself for 5 minutes. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the Farm Food and National Security Act of 2024 included two important provisions to put the ladder of opportunity within greater reach for certain individuals, excluding any wages earned from SNAP E&T or other career and technical education programs from counting towards income for SNAP eligibility, and removing an outdated ban on former drug felons from receiving SNAP. We heard a powerful testimony today from Mr. William Lewis about the difference these changes can make in someone's journey. Mr. Schaefer, can you expand upon why these provisions are crucial to expanding access to SNAP employment and career and technical education opportunities, and how would they make a direct impact on the vulnerable populations that CEO serves?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both of these provisions would be absolutely critical for not just the tens of thousands of individuals who return from incarceration every year looking for employment and who are also relying on SNAP benefits, but thousands and tens of thousands of other Americans. The first provision you mentioned, the Training, Nutrition, Stability Act, would disregard the income earned in a temporary job, a paid training activity. Those are new activities allowed in the 2018 Farm Bill. They're robust training opportunities that really can lead to family-sustaining wages. The unintended consequence of that 2018 language was that these new wages now allowed to be earned in the E&T program count against the benefits. So many individuals, as you heard from Mr. Lewis and countless others, will see as soon as they begin to work, their benefits decline. It's incredibly dispiriting, it's lack of voting, but it really forces almost impossible trade-off decisions for people. Do I put more gas in the car or do I buy new clothes for an interview? And the passage of TNSA, the Training, Nutrition, Stability Act, would take away those impossible trade-off decisions. The solution is bipartisan. There were 6 Democrats and 6 Republicans co-sponsoring the legislation in the last Congress. We anticipate that same bipartisan spirit again under your leadership. And I would also emphasize that, when done effectively, E&T is a temporary, time-limited program. At an organization like CEO, we thrive when someone within 3 or 4 months of receiving not just SNAP nutrition benefits, but the training that goes along with it, within 3 or 4 months, they're placed in a job that can reduce their need for wages. Just quickly on the Restore Act, which is the felony drug conviction ban. Still 20 states have this ban. I was recently talking to a staff member in North Carolina. A new orientation class at CEO was coming into the room. People were ready and eager to go. There was a little bit of a stigma around accepting SNAP benefits, and one woman was crestfallen, realizing that her drug conviction was going to prevent her from getting it. And we make this exclusion at the peril of public safety. Studies have found that individuals who do receive SNAP with drug convictions are 10% less likely to recidivate.
Thank you very much. Dr. Rashidi, Dr. Schanzenbach, and Mr. Tidwell, from your viewpoint, how do we strengthen the connection between receiving SNAP and securing long-term employment? And we'll start with Dr. Rashidi. Any thoughts?
Yes, I do think this issue of effective marginal tax rates or benefit cliffs is one that does not get enough attention, and you've heard that from a number of witnesses this morning. So this idea that when people work, their benefit is reduced. Now that's natural because these are means-tested programs, so that you need to design the benefit in that way, but there are tweaks that we can make to the SNAP formula in determining the benefit level that can smooth out those benefits at a more appropriate rate so that people are not facing this large decrease in benefits when they increase their employment.
Thank you. Dr. Schanzenbach?
I'll add to that the investments this committee has made in SNAP employment and training, especially in high-quality evidence-based programs like we've seen discussed here today, are really important. I'll also point out that those are largely voluntary programs, and sometimes we also talk about E&T programs that are not high quality, they're low touch, et cetera. I think we see great outcomes with these programs because they meet people when they're ready, they surround them, and it's voluntary.
Thank you. Mr. Tidwell?
I firmly believe that a collaborative approach is the only way that we're going to solve any of these issues. Many times providers work in these silos, and we're afraid that we're going to run out of people to serve. That could not be further from the truth. If we'll work together, connect people with the opportunities that they seek we can be successful. Our Skilled BR initiative that launched is proving to be effective at connecting every player in the workforce arena together. That's the key to success.
Thank you, Mr. Tedman. My time has expired, and I'll recognize the ranking member for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. First, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter a letter into the record. It's from 1,800 national, state, and local organizations in communities across our country, asking the House and Senate to reject proposed cuts to SNAP because of their likelihood to increase hunger and harm the economy. Signers range from small organizations like My Local Food Bank to nationwide organizations and faith leaders, job creators, unions, medical associations, and groups spanning the entire food supply chain. With that, Mr. Chairman,
Without objection.
thank you so much. As I said earlier here, I'm not sure why my colleagues think that slashing SNAP, Medicaid, and other critical programs to pay for tax cuts, for the majority of those to go to the ultra-wealthy in this country, I'm not sure why that's a priority for Congress right now. We would love to be working on a bipartisan farm bill instead. And if we were, I'd be happy to talk today about the ways we can improve employment and training programs. As it is, farmers and families are struggling, and the policies of this administration are simply making it worse. The cuts proposed in reconciliation, they just add insult to injury. USDA estimates that farmers receive nearly a quarter of every dollar spent on food at home. And the latest research shows that SNAP participants cut their food purchases by roughly half for every dollar they lose in SNAP benefits. They find that half a dollar by cutting back on other basic needs like housing or medical care. That not only means that $230 billion in cuts to SNAP would leave Americans hungrier and less healthy, but also that cuts of this magnitude would have a direct hit to the farm sector of approximately $30 billion. To top all of this off, the president has decided to engage in a worldwide trade war, which will also hit farm income for America's family farmers. Last time around, the Trump administration's trade wars cost our farmers $30 billion in lost exports. So between misguided trade wars and misguided cuts to SNAP, we're looking at roughly $60 billion in hits to farm revenue. Everyday Americans are also feeling the strain from this administration's policies. 600 steel workers were laid off in Minnesota 2 weeks ago due to this economic uncertainty. Last week, the Minnesota Department of Health announced significant layoffs affecting approximately 300 employees after the administration slashed over $220 million in grant funding. Cutting SNAP benefits by $230 billion in reconciliation would increase food costs by $2,000 a year for a typical SNAP household of 4. Adding in the $4,000 per year that Trump's tariffs will cost the average American family, that's $6,000. Dr. Schanzenbach, hypothetically, what do you think farmers losing $60 billion in revenue would mean for the farm economy? What about families losing $6,000 per year in additional costs? What could that mean for our broader economy as well?
One of the things that you didn't mention was the interaction that all of these play. So yes, families will be hurt. Yes, farmers will be hurt. Yes, grocery stores, the transportation sector will be hurt. And then those continue to interplay with one another. So then, they lay off someone who works at the grocery store and, the cycle continues. Now, usually when we're looking at bad economic times in the future, we're talking about shoring up programs like SNAP and making sure that we're stimulating the economy and protecting people. And I hope that we can start talking about that here too.
Can you say just a little bit more about the impact on family farmers? Because, my colleagues and I, we care a lot about the farm economy and about getting a farm bill done.
Yeah, I think the combination of the trade war and the cut to something that, you know, people spend so much on food is going to be nothing but bad for farmers.
With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm meeting your request and giving you a little time back, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Oklahoma, former chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, Mr. Lucas, for 5 minutes.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, and I miss the old days on the Ag Committee. That said, Ms. Schaefer, let's return back to the subject matter here that we've been working on. And I know you addressed some of the chairman's questions about benefits cliff, but could you talk for a moment about how SNAP participants worry about the benefits cliff, and which they earn just enough to disqualify themselves, but not quite enough to support themselves? Your company has several locations in my state of Oklahoma. Could you explain how the work CEO does with SNAP and ET helps to alleviate the benefits cliff concerns and encourages sustained employment that ultimately reduces participants' reliance on assistance?
Yes,
And
Mr.
it's
Lewis.
wonderful having Mr. Lewis here, by the way, an example of that success.
Absolutely, it's a privilege to testify alongside Mr. Lewis today. And you know, since 2011, Mr. Lucas, CEO, has provided training and employment opportunities to over 6,000 people in the state of Oklahoma across our Tulsa and Oklahoma City offices. This year, 89% of the people who walk through a front door at CEO, two things will be true. 89% of them will need SNAP benefits for that essential initial lifeline in the weeks and days just after incarceration. And about half of those individuals will have never worked before. The E&T program, which, as we've mentioned, has allowed since 2018 for more robust evidence-based interventions, allows us to give them a transitional job. Through partnerships with Oklahoma DOT, Tulsa Community College, the city of Oklahoma City, they work 3 to 4 days a week. It's daily pay, it's getting them those initial skills, and immediately their benefits begin to drop. Right, and that's where those trade-off decisions start becoming really difficult. So there's a few strategies, right? As a workforce organization, we could try to quickly place them into a higher wage job, but without the requisite training and skills, they aren't likely to succeed. One of the best opportunities that we can do through SNAP E&T is to offer advanced credentials, right? Something like a construction trade certification, something in the commercial driving sector. Those often will pay a stipend, but again, that stipend is enough to reduce benefits, but not enough to get someone family-sustaining wages. So if we can pass the Training and Nutrition Stability Act, we can disregard that income from the benefits calculation. We can get more people into these advanced trainings and into these jobs that are paying now upwards $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year.
Focusing more broadly on the employment needs of the communities you work in. There are, 83,000 open jobs every year in Oklahoma. Is it in your experience, Mr. Schaefer, that employers are ready for these individuals to join the workforce at an expedited rate?
Absolutely, when those individuals have the requisite skills that those employers need. I think a key component that has to be factored into the E&T program, whether in Oklahoma or any state around the country, is that we are training people for jobs that are needed in the local economy. In Oklahoma and Tulsa, Oklahoma City specifically, we identified welding and commercial driving as two really high in-demand skills for individuals. You know, and what's so encouraging is not just that we're training people. I can talk to you a little bit about Robert Honorisi, who got a welding certificate after 10 years incarcerated, immediately came out, was hired by Valmont Industries to make $24 at a starting wage. It's since gone up. That's exciting as an individual level, but what's really encouraging to me is that Valmont has hired 10 more people coming through this program. They are eager and hungry. So when we target E&T programs to the needs of the local economy, it helps the individual, but also the broader employment sector generally.
Mr. Tidwell, in your testimony, you shared several success stories of individuals who were able to find steady employment and lift themselves out of SNAP assistance. Would you say employers you work with are eager for the program's participants to begin work? Is there a demand for the folks?
Absolutely. In Louisiana, the demand for skilled labor continues to increase year after year. In Louisiana, CDL drivers are needed every day. Individuals to work in the petrochem industry are needed every day. And if we can continue to partner with training providers to get our participants the skills, the certifications, and the training that they need, and then connect them directly to these employers so they complete our program, get a job in a high-demand field, and help them jump the benefits cliff. If we cannot get them to a job that pays enough to jump this cliff, it's really hurtful. But our goal is to get them in higher-paying, sustainable, in-need careers.
Clearly, Mr. Chairman, there are good things we need to be working on in this coming Farm Bill. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. Dr. Schinzenbach, every month, 42 million Americans rely on SNAP to put food on the table. And this includes 1.5 million veterans. And yet, my Republican friends are pushing a dangerous reconciliation bill that will slash $230 billion out of this program and impacting disabled veterans. My question to you, my first question is, can you expand on the disproportionate harm that implementing stricter work requirements for SNAP to pay for tax cuts will have on our veterans?
So I think, veterans will be hurt both by, any sort of across-the-board cut, because, this benefit is about $6 a day. This is not people, living high on the hog, right? People really struggle even with SNAP benefits to put SNAP on the table, especially as we're facing more inflation, this trade war, et cetera. At this point in time, requiring, this strict work requirements, I think the evidence shows will kick a lot of people off of SNAP and won't improve employment outcomes.
And can you guarantee that not a single veteran, including the 50,000 veterans in my state of Georgia who rely on SNAP, will lose access to the SNAP program under this misguided and downright mean Republican bill?
I cannot guarantee that your constituents won't be hurt. That's a lot of double negatives, but I think it will hurt people.
And what are some of the unique barriers, tell us, that veterans face when meeting SNAP worker requirements? And what should Congress do to remove these barriers?
I really think that it's very wise to invest in SNAP ENT programs to help people that either don't have the skills to succeed in the job market or have struggled with alcohol or substance abuse or mental health challenges. All of those I think are common in this population, including among veterans. It's very wise to fund programs that can help come alongside these folks when they're ready and help them to build the skills that they need to get a middle-class job.
Veterans make up 8% of the population in my state of Georgia. And what do I tell them about this? What kind of program needs to be there? You don't slash $230 billion out of a program that is so vital to survival. The one thing we cannot do without is food. This is a mean stroke that these Republicans are doing. And we need to really defend defeat this measure with every method that we can. Nobody has paid the price for the greatness and security of our nation than our veterans. And to slash $230 billion, you don't think that's going to cause some great trouble?
I think we owe our veterans more than that. I agree with you.
Well, I will tell you, we are going to defeat this bill.
Gentleman's time has expired. Now recognize the other gentleman from Georgia, the other Congressman Scott from Georgia even, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to point out to Americans that are watching this, the reason we're cutting spending is because we have a $2 trillion budget deficit. A $2 trillion budget deficit, even though tax revenues have been higher than they've ever been in the history of the country. I would also point out that in January, the U.S. trade deficit hit a record $130.7 billion. Nobody on the Republican side of the aisle felt like we could fix the trade deficit or the budget deficit by simply saying pretty please. I don't think the American citizens expected us to be able to fix them by saying pretty please either. We made it very clear there was going to be some short-term pain to save the dollar as the world currency. And so I'm glad that trade deals are now being negotiated in a manner that will be equitable for both parties, and I look forward to the reduction in that trade deficit, which will lead to an increase in jobs and opportunities inside the United States of America. Now, I think work is a good thing. I don't mind telling you that. I think it's a good thing, and when you tell people that they don't have to work, you're not helping them, because when they don't work, money's not being paid into the Social Security system on their behalf, and when they reach retirement age, that is going to have an impact on their Social Security benefits. Is that correct? Is that correct? Does anybody dispute that? So when you're telling people that they don't have to work, you're actually, the end result of that is a reduction in their employment benefits. So let's talk about jobs. Mr. Schaefer, most of the open jobs across the country no longer require a college degree, but some type of credential. In fact, those jobs actually pay more than most of the jobs with college degrees now, especially in the Southeast. Can you talk about the types of Credentials Center for Employment Opportunities offers, and how do you make sure that they are in demand and aligned with the industry needs of your region?
It's a great question, and really this has to be looked at. When we look at advanced training, we look at the credentials CEO offers or other workforce providers offer, it has to be done in a geographically specific way. I heard my colleague, Mr. Tidwell, talk about the petrochemical industry and the training required for that. And I can say with great confidence that that training is not necessary in our Fresno, California office, where there is not a petrochemical industry. And so that scan often identifies a few things that are consistent: construction trades, as well as commercial driver's licenses. But then when you go a level deeper, you may see that it's IT, it's more specialized trainings in healthcare that could be beneficial. And what really unifies and makes these all an opportunity is that the E&T program, right, which was expanded to offer paid training and apprenticeships in the 2018 Farm Bill, is a tremendous mechanism to help pay for these trainings for folks who are looking to achieve self-sufficiency.
So, Dr. Rashidi, we've heard a lot today about how work requirements don't work. Can you explain the limitations of the studies commonly cited by those who make the argument, make that argument? And what evidence do we have from the 96 reforms that were made to the cash welfare programs that work requirements are in the best interest of both the country and the people that are going back to work?
It's a great question. The evidence we have on work requirements in SNAP is pretty limited because we've never actually had a randomized control trial like we had the welfare reforms in the late 1996 period. So the description of high quality studies, I would dispute slightly because it's just limited. Some of the studies that are out there are constrained by data limitations, methodological limitations. But regardless of that, we do have evidence from the late 1990s using more rigorous methods that work requirements can improve employment. It was in a different context, different population, but it certainly points to the potential for evidence. And the last thing I'll just add is there's multiple outcomes that can come from work requirements. One is being an increase in employment, so that affects people who are not working, who then are incentivized to work. The other is the disclosure of unreported employment. And I think that that is something that is a very real thing and would not show up on increased employment levels, but it does ensure that the benefits are targeted in the
My
appropriate
time
way.
has expired, but thank you. And I just want to end with, work is a good thing, and you're not helping anybody by telling them they don't have to work.
Thank the gentleman. Now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Costa, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad that we're holding this hearing this morning. I missed most of the comments that my colleagues have made, so I hope I'm not repetitious here. But the bottom line is this. We don't have a farm bill at this point in time because we've yet to be able to bridge the gap between people in America who are food insecure and the rest of the titles in the farm bill that have had success and are popular in many instances and oversubscribed. And therefore, we have a logjam, so to speak, and we're being asked to make cuts, at least it seems to me, given the caps that the chairman, and I let me be very clear, I want to commend the chairman for his continued source of enthusiasm and efforts to try to make this work what is almost a conundrum of impossible ends. At least they seem to be that way with me. And this is my fourth farm bill. So I think I've had a little experience in how we reach that bipartisan compromise, bridge the gap. We're not there, and we're over a year and a half into this, and I'm trying to figure out just what will lead us to bridge that gap. Because food is a national security issue. Food is an international security issue. And when you have 47 million Americans that are food insecure, you've got a challenge. And the Farm Bill generally, in a bipartisan fashion, I think, has been viewed as America's safety net. A safety net for folks that are food insecure, for farmers, ranchers, dairymen, and women that are all part of the food supply chain that work very hard with our farm workers to put food on America's dinner table every night. And that gets taken for granted. So, I represent one of the largest agricultural regions in the entire country. Yet it's a dichotomy. My congressional district and Congressman Valadez are number 1 and number 2 in SNAP recipients. So you have this incredible agricultural productivity, and yet at the same time, 27 to 30% of our population are food insecure and reliant on SNAP. And we believe in the work ethic really well in the Valley. Everybody works. But a lot of these folks work seasonally. They have families of 4 or 5, maybe make $24,000 a year, and it's pretty hard in seasonal employment to try to put that food on your own family's dinner table when it certainly isn't enough. So let me ask a few questions here and cut to the point. Mr. Schaefer, you in your testimony cited the importance of having a sustained pathway to ensure economic stability. Could you elaborate on the vital role that SNAP plays in workforce training, especially for rural communities like mine?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking just in the context, Mr. Costa, of CEO, for whom everyone is coming home from incarceration, studies have shown that upwards of 91% of those individuals are food insecure, right? And that's pretty much everyone. It also tracks with my experience. People come.
So let me ask you this question because my time's limited. If we limit the benefits for a person in a secure workplace, would that be detrimental?
Yes, I mean, for an individual at CEO, that initial SNAP benefit in the days, weeks after incarceration the SNAP nutrition benefits are a lifeline. The nature of our program is that we guarantee everyone a paid temporary job. In that period, the paid temporary job, which is often 3 to 4 days a week, starts limiting the benefits.
And we have work requirements in California as well that I think, complement this effort. Dr., if I pronounce this right, Schunzenbach, in your testimony, you acknowledged that research and studies on various populations. Would you agree that increasing work requirements have an economic cost for families of all types who are trying to get out of poverty?
I do. I think that SNAP helps people get back to work. It helps people get back on their feet. And harsh work requirements are counterproductive.
Because we have additional threats right now with these tariffs. I'm very concerned about our agriculture economy causing food costs to increase. The president campaigned that he was going to reduce food costs. That hasn't happened. And it's going to make it more difficult and harder for families who are not only food insecure, but the ranchers, dairymen, and women who rely on the return on their profit on their commodities to make a living, right? Thank you. My time's expired, Mr. Chairman. Continue with your optimism.
General time has expired. Now recognize gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Boss, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to give a statement here, and I just want to know if any of you know where it came from. Give us a chance we haven't had before to break the cycle of dependency that has existed for millions and millions of our fellow citizens, excelling them to the world of work. It gives structure and meaning and dignity to the purpose in lives. Anybody know who said that? Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, 1996, after the Welfare Reform Act. And that is because it worked. Matter of fact, the reason I know it worked is one of my first bills I passed as a state legislator was the Welfare Reform of Illinois. And it was amazing how quickly, when that started working, it was that the federal government picked it up and did those changes. So now, as we're talking about work, I think it's amazing that it was mentioned a while ago on veterans. Does everybody understand that veterans, when we're talking about work requirements, that veterans are excluded entirely from the ABAWD work requirements? That should be also mentioned. So with that, I want to thank all the witnesses for being here. And according to the USDA, only 28% of non-disabled adults without dependents age 18 to 54, AWB, AWDs, on SNAP, who are subject to work requirements are working. 40% of all ABAWD currently live under a state waiver of work requirements, including in my home state of Illinois. States are abusing loopholes in the law and keep people on the sidelines and stuck in lives of government dependencies. These are millions of able-bodied American workers that we need to work, especially when there are 7 million open jobs across this nation. Dr. Ricchetti, why, when we have low unemployment rates, so many jobs available across this country, do you think half of all states they're under some type of waiver under the ABAWD work requirement?
The USDA FNS sets the regulations on what qualifies it's in the legislation that states can waive the requirement if there's a lack of sufficient jobs or 10% unemployment rate. So there's regulations that the USDA FNS establishes to define those lack of sufficient jobs. They've been on the books for a very long time. There's 2 in particular that I think are overly generous that allow states to kind of manipulate so that they can receive waivers. One is that they have to be 20% above the national unemployment rate. So you can imagine if you have a 3% national unemployment rate, 20% higher than that is still a fairly low unemployment rate. And the other is they're able to group areas in a way that can maximize their waiver coverage. So those are allowed under current regulations, and that's what allows states to waive the work requirement even when economic conditions are fairly good.
And I think that a majority of those states that have those waivers are also those states like mine that, I want to say this, that I believe that there's certain people who want to keep people out of the workforce and dependent on government. And they want them dependent on government because therefore they're loyal to a party. And it's really sad that we are wanting more entrapments into these programs than we do to want to give somebody an opportunity to go into the workforce, to thrive, to make their lives better for their families, and to encourage them to do that. Now, I think we can all agree that we want to see American families not go hungry, and we want to help our neighbors in need. But there's a need to have some accountability. I believe that as we're moving forward with these proposals, it is just that, to try to help people better their lives. No one wants to starve them to death, and no one on this panel, I believe, wants to starve somebody to death. But we are a nation that takes great pride in our accomplishments and our work. And we need to make sure that people have that opportunity to work and don't feel entrapped by government programs. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. McGovern, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me be blunt. It's frustrating to be here today. To have a hearing on this topic at this moment, I think, is a colossal disappointment. I think it's an insult to America's farmers and ranchers, an insult to hungry families, and frankly, given what is happening in the world right now, an insult to the intelligence of anyone with a functioning brain. Where's our hearing on tariffs, Mr. Chairman? Where's our hearing on how these tariffs are going to cost farmers and ranchers billions in lost sales? Where's our hearings on how the Secretary of Agriculture went on TV this weekend and couldn't explain why we're slapping tariffs on uninhabited islands in the middle of the ocean? I mean, this stuff is nuts. Where's our hearing on how Trump and Elon Musk are shutting down the USDA phone lines, firing the staff that farmers rely on for help, and gutting the programs that connect local farms to local schools? Where's our hearing on how food prices are about to go through the roof? This administration went from promising lower prices and a better economy to promising higher prices and a recession. And just when you think it couldn't get more out of touch, they're cutting SNAP to pay for tax breaks for Trump and his billionaire buddies. So let me get this straight. You guys tank the economy, you drive up food prices, and your solution is to cut food assistance for people who already struggle to afford food? Who the hell thought that was a good idea? I mean, honestly, I'd like to meet them just so I could ask them what's wrong with them. This is literally trying to sabotage our country. You guys are setting the house on fire and slashing the fire department's budget at the same time. It is insane. And if I have to sit through one more Republican lecture about how SNAP discourages work, I might lose it. This is grade A, weapons grade stupidity. It's a lie. It was a lie the first time you said it, and it'll still be a lie the millionth time. Now, let me break it down for folks at home. Most people on SNAP are kids, senior citizens, and people with disabilities. They cannot work, and we don't expect them to. Should we repeal the child labor laws? Send grandma back to the factory? And of the people who can work, the vast majority already do. So spare us the condescending talk about the dignity of work. If you guys cared about that, you'd be raising the minimum wage. But you don't. You care about demonizing poor people to score political points. And you guys can go right ahead and do that, but don't expect the rest of us to play along. And before you guys all pull out your Heritage Foundation talking points on work requirements, I just want to say to everyone watching at home, there are already very strict work requirements in SNAP and time limits for able-bodied adults. Look it up. It's the law. And by the way, SNAP benefits are paltry. We're talking $2 per meal. That's what it is now. You guys want to cut the program by $230 billion. You want to even lower that. But most of you spent more on your coffee this morning. Now, call me radical, but I don't think it's morally right to slash a food benefit that costs a sliver of the federal budget while farmers get hammered and food prices go through the roof. So if we want to talk about government waste, let's talk about the billions in tax breaks for billionaires. Let's talk about big oil subsidies. Let's talk about the Pentagon losing track of trillions. But this hearing, this bizarre obsession with punishing hungry people while ignoring the crisis facing farmers, it's a bad faith, tone-deaf, mean-spirited shtick to get you a clip on right-wing talk radio. And I'm not here for it. So shame on this committee and shame on Republicans. Ms. Schanzenbach, I'm short on time, but I have a few yes or no questions. First, are there already strict work requirements and time limits in SNAP?
Yes.
Will people be paying higher prices for food because of Trump's absurd trade war?
Yes.
And are current SNAP benefits enough to cover the cost of a meal for hungry families?
No.
I mean, and again, we're talking about a reconciliation bill coming up to cut the program by $230 billion. So that $2 per meal benefit that I just mentioned probably goes down to about $1.60. I mean, how the hell is people supposed to live on that and feed their kids and feed their families? For those who think that cuts in SNAP are a good idea, that putting more restrictions on poor people trying to feed their families is a good idea, let me make a suggestion. You know, stop watching so much Fox News, stop listening to right-wing think tanks, and maybe start talking to people who are on the benefit, who are struggling to basically make ends meet and to feed their families. And with that, I yield back my time.
I appreciate the gentleman for his remarks based on a bill that hasn't been defined yet of cuts. I now recognize the gentleman with a big brain, I guess, in that context. You missed that part, Dusty. Mr. Johnson from South Dakota.
Mr. Chairman, I would just start by observing that I think reasonable people can disagree on policy without resorting to insults and accusations, and this committee generally has been a hallmark of great bipartisan work. And listen, work requirements for SNAP have been a bipartisan exercise in the past, and I'm disheartened that so many of my colleagues today have chosen to use so much of their time to try to demonize the motivations, when this is something we do. We try to talk about how to move people off of welfare, how to create better lives, how to have more income mobility. And to the extent that we have tactical disagreements on policy, shouldn't we begin from an assumption that our motivation is indeed to try to make a better America? And so I would hope that in the future we could do better. I will start with Ms. Rashidi. Much has been made today about the negative aspects of work requirements, but you argued, I think, effectively in your testimony, ma'am, that they can be a positive force in people's lives. Tell us more.
Well, yes. I mean, to the extent that work requirements increase employment or allow people to continue employment and move up the income ladder, it certainly can be positive. I mean, we have a lot of evidence showing that employment is financially benefit to households as well as non-financially in terms of the dignity of work, social networks that they can access. I think it's hard to argue that work is not a positive thing.
Ms. Rashidi, is there any replicatable recipe for escaping poverty that doesn't have at its core work, training, and education?
Well, sure, increasing government transfers, but that's not necessarily sustainable or doable in most countries.
Clearly, support services, I would think we can all agree that good supports do help people escape poverty. Talk to us about the role of making sure that the training is in place.
Yes, so government support can certainly be helpful, especially for low-income families who struggle to, struggle to work consistently for a variety of reasons, or lack skills. And so training can be crucial support for them. I will add, though, it needs to be effective training. We have a lot of evidence suggesting that training programs, especially targeting low-income households, are not necessarily effective, but there are certainly programs that are effective. My witnesses here at the table have evidence of some success in their programs. So yes, training is a crucial component to the support services that we offer to low-income households.
You noted in your testimony that the workforce participation rate for able-bodied people without dependents is still below pre-pandemic levels. Did I hear that right?
Well, the work levels they've been fairly consistent. You might be referring to the number of ABODs receiving SNAP. That remains higher than pre-pandemic, but certainly things have not improved for ABODs receiving SNAP since the pandemic.
There's been some allegation today that work requirements don't work. That is not supported by all of the evidence. There are clearly instances where work requirements have worked. Give us some sense of what some states have done better than others, of course. So what characteristics of effective policy should we be looking to make sure that these work requirements do the best job of helping people escape poverty?
That's a great question. So when we're talking about work requirements in SNAP, we're talking about work for pay, but we're also talking about work activities like volunteer. You can satisfy a work requirement with volunteer activities. So states that can be successful if they really focus on how can we move these participants towards employment with an employment and training program, for example, getting them connected to an organization with volunteer work. I think states need to be creative and put their resources in effective ways to do that, rather than focusing on ineffective programs or focusing on things that can be detrimental to participants.
Some of my colleagues, unfortunately, have attempted to demonize work requirements today rather than talk about good policy. So just, Dr. Rashidi, let's make sure I understand this. Do any of the existing work requirements impact pregnant women?
No.
Do any of them impact those with disabilities?
No.
Do any of them impact those people who live in areas with high unemployment?
No. Depending on how you define high, but yes, if high unemployment, no.
Do any of them impact people who have young dependents at home?
No.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I would observe that so much of the demonization that is done around work requirements have actually no evidentiary basis, and with that I would yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. And now recognize Dr. Adams for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. It's really important what we're talking about, but for me it's PPP again, punishing poor people. Let me just say, for those of you who may not know, I was a professor for 40 years before coming to Congress, and I think I probably need to put my teaching hat back on today because things just aren't adding up. Family farms are at risk, yet Republicans have decided to wage a worldwide trade war. And last time around, Trump's tariffs cost our farmers $30 billion in lost exports. Food costs are high, so what do Republicans do? We're threatening $230 billion in cuts to SNAP, our nation's most effective food assistance program. And instead of fighting to lower costs for everyday Americans and passing a bipartisan farm bill, and I had the pleasure of working on the last one, but to give certainty to families and farmers, Republicans are prioritizing massive cuts to pay for tax breaks for their wealthy donors like Elon Musk. And they're not denying that. Now, we should be talking today about how to invest in SNAP because it helps 42 million Americans afford food each month. It supports farmers and it stimulates local economies. But instead, we're talking about slashing benefits for our most vulnerable families. If Republicans are successful at slashing benefits by rolling back the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan reevaluation in reconciliation, then a typical SNAP household of 4 will see their benefits cut and food costs increase by more than $2,000 a year, rising to over $3,000 a year by 2034. Dr. Shanzabak, in my home district, over 28,000 households depend on SNAP, over half of which are families with children. They cannot afford to lose $3,000 a year. And as someone who has studied these issues extensively, what do you think it would mean for low-income families to have their benefits slashed by over 20% on average?
Yeah, I think that we'll see more food insecurity. I think we'll see diets get worse. I think we'll see all sorts of harm to a broad range of people, families with children, the elderly, disabled people, et cetera, especially if then we head into a recession like so many people are expecting.
Punishing poor people. Well, there have been also implications today that the increase in benefits from the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan is incentivizing people not to work and instead to depend on SNAP. The 2021 Thrifty Food Plan contributes an average of $1.40 per person per day to SNAP benefits. And let me just say that again, $1.40. Now, instead of SNAP benefits being $4 and change, they're a little over $6 per day. And I don't think most folks in this room could say with a straight face that for only $1.40 a day, more a day, that you'd be able to stop working. Dr. Sensenbach, how do you think the $1.40, per day that the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan provides has impacted people who depend on SNAP to put food on their tables?
We've got evidence that when the benefit is made more adequate, when it's expanded a little bit, people are able to eat a more diverse and healthy food diet. So people buy more perishables, they buy just higher quality proteins, things like that. So I think that we've seen real good come from the enhanced benefit.
You know, in my district, we have a lot of food deserts, and people cannot even get to purchase the kind of food that they need. You know, you can't be healthy if you're hungry. That's just point blank. Those things go together. Mr. Chairman, I'd like for unanimous consent to enter a letter from 31 national religious organizations urging Congress to avoid all changes to SNAP and reconciliation that shift costs to states, expand work requirements, or impact the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan. I'd like to enter that into the record, sir.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, and thank you all for your testimony. I'll yield back.
Joe yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Feenstra, for 5 minutes. Oh. Now, Ms. Miller is after Mr. Feenstra.
Are you calling me?
Now, I'm sorry. You're right. Now, Mr. Feenstra's not here. Okay. Ms. Miller, go ahead, please.
Okay.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Dr. Rushidi, in your testimony, you mentioned state waivers of work requirements. Mr. Bost has already mentioned this today, but I want to highlight again, my home state, Illinois, is one of the states that's abusing these waivers. Illinois has received a statewide waiver despite having an unemployment rate of 5.2%. In some counties, the rate is as low as 2.6%, and none of the counties meet the 10% threshold. Can you speak to how these statewide waivers undermine the integrity of the SNAP program, and what reforms would you recommend to ensure waivers are only granted where truly warranted?
I do think it undermines the integrity of the program. The work requirement that was put in place for ABODs in 1996 what did have a waiver ability, but it was specific to areas of high unemployment, and defined as 10%, or areas that lack sufficient jobs. So clearly the intent was that states and counties should implement ABOD work requirements, and that they only could waive that when unemployment conditions were poor. And so when you allow states to waive these work requirements, even when unemployment conditions are positive, as you mentioned, I do think that undermines the integrity of the program.
You also mentioned the need for Congress to address the benefit cliffs. Can you expand on this issue as it pertains to SNAP and how Congress can fix it?
Yeah, this is a very tough issue because we've heard today about disregarding earnings from income as one way to address that issue, meaning that people can keep their benefits even when their earnings increase. That's one way to address the issue, kind of at certain level of benefits, but without expanding the income eligibility, you're still putting households in a difficult position, because once they reach the income eligibility limit, which is 130% of poverty, in some states at 200%, they still, if their benefit is relatively high, because you have disregarded all this income in calculating the benefit, they will face a substantial drop in benefit. So the key to this, again, complicated issue is that you have to align the maximum benefit level, the tapering point, and the exit point of the benefit. You have to align all of those things. And again, it gets complicated, but it's important to consider all of those factors together. So deductions from income, income eligibility, and maximum benefits, consider them all together so that households have their benefits phase out to $0 in a reasonable, at a reasonable rate.
Thank you, and we'll look forward to working with you to fix that issue. Mr. Tidwell, how does faith play a role in what you do at Hope Ministries?
Well, in the community that we serve, we have found that the faith-based community, churches, synagogues, and the like, are a key component in serving SNAP E&T participants. One of the challenges that we have seen over the years is building trust. Having the okay of these spiritual leaders in our community goes a long way in building that trust. If trust can be built, we are a lot more successful at serving them, help them overcome past traumas, and changing a mindset of a right now job into a mindset of a career. Changing the mindset of time is only right now to time is future. Changing the mindset of I'm fated. It's always been this way. It's always going to be this way. If that can be changed and their future can seem brighter and can seem obtainable, they're a lot more successful. The faith-based community plays a key role in building that trust and changing that narrative for many.
I think you've been doing great work, and I think we should expand on these kind of programs. People need relationships tied to the financial help. And I do want to address the committee also, because people are trashing President Trump and the tariffs, and how President Trump is advocating for the American people and the American farmer, and for great trade policies using leverage in a key way. I'm one of the few family farmers left in Congress. I represent a heavy ag district, and I can say the last 4 years, the ag community and farmers have not been thriving. Inflation under Joe Biden has been crushing, and we've had a lax to none to a poor trade policy. And we, in my district, support President Trump and what he's doing with the tariffs. Thank you very much.
Gentlelady's time has expired. Now recognize the gentlelady from Kansas, Ms. Davids, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson, and thank you to you and Ranking Member Craig for holding this hearing today. We are in a time where farmers are already facing some pretty serious economic uncertainty, and should be focused on strengthening our farm economy and expanding access to markets and not making things harder. Recently, President Trump did announce a new wave of tariffs that have the potential of devastating our economy and certainly dragging Kansas farmers into a self-inflicted trade war. These decisions have real consequences. Kansas producers are going to face higher costs for critical inputs like seeds and equipment. They'll be hit even harder when they export because we're seeing export markets potentially start to close. Kansas is the 8th largest agricultural exporting state in our country. Our farmers and ranchers rely on access to international markets to sell their crops. But now we're seeing countries like China responding with steep retaliatory tariffs. These policies are putting Kansas producers in the crosshairs. And it's not just farmers who are going to feel the pain. Families across Kansas are already feeling the strain of higher grocery prices. These tariffs are going to drive up costs even more, especially for items like coffee and bananas, which we don't produce in the United States. And the reality is these harms are entirely avoidable. These tariffs are the result of choices made by the president. But here in the House Agriculture Committee, we do have a responsibility to respond, not with political games, but with real solutions that provide certainty and support to our producers. That means protecting Farm Bill programs like supplemental nutrition assistance programs. Our families rely on these. In my district alone, more than 8,000 households depend on SNAP to put food on the table. It also helps keep our agricultural economy moving by ensuring that people can buy Kansas-grown goods. I would like for us to stay focused on what really matters, which is supporting the folks who grow our food and feed our families. So my first question is for Dr. Schanzenbach. Economists have estimated that cutting SNAP by $230 billion could reduce farm revenue by approximately $30 billion. Under the current Senate Republicans' latest budget resolution, the House Agriculture Committee would be required to cut at least $230 billion over 10 years in order to pay for tax cuts. I would argue tax cuts for billionaires. Assuming that these cuts would come from SNAP and not from farm programs, how would these cuts and cuts of this magnitude to food assistance impact farmers and the agriculture economy?
Yeah, I think you're right about we're expecting about a $30 billion loss in the farm economy, maybe even more than that when you factor in all of the dynamic effects. But then combining that with a trade war, I think that, is going to hurt farmers. And I think it's going to hurt all Americans.
So I'll follow up. I'm pretty deeply concerned about cuts to SNAP and eroding the nutritional and agricultural coalitions that have carried previous farm bills across the finish line. Right now, the economic pressures on Kansas farmers and ranchers due to the impacts of, or in addition to the impacts of President Trump's tariffs that I would characterize as reckless, are creating a lot of instability in farm country. It's why now more than ever we're going to need a bipartisan farm bill that can actually become law and provide producers with certainty and the resources that they need. Do you thoughts?
Yes.
Do you think that removing $230 billion from the food economy would increase uncertainty that farmers are already feeling?
Yes, it'll increase uncertainty for farmers. It will increase uncertainty for families, all sorts of small business owners. And I think in this moment, it would be great if Congress could add more stability, to get rid of some of the volatility that I'm afraid we're going to face.
Yeah, thank you. And, I would say that we're in an atmosphere where too many people, farmers and businesses included, are dealing with tons of uncertainty. And this level of uncertainty that is being added by federal policy is unacceptable. Thank you for your time. Thank you to all our witnesses for being here today. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Feenstra, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member Craig. This is an important topic. I want to thank our witnesses for your testimony. I read through your testimony. And, the bottom line here is we need to build pathways out of poverty. I mean, that's all we want to do, right? We want to build pathways out of poverty. And we've created some great programs to do that, such as SNAP. And now it's just a matter of how can we improve on these programs? How can we make them more effective? How can we make them work? When I think about what SNAP does and how we can create participation, whether it be participation in work, whether it be participating in matching a skill with a job. So that comes through training, that comes through education. These are all vital components of doing this. I was very excited and happy to join my colleague Dusty Johnson in introducing a legislation aimed to closing certain loopholes that would threaten some of these issues. So Ms. Rashadi, and if I said your name wrong, I humbly apologize, but how can we work to promote a better SNAP program and eliminate states' use of abusing some of the waivers that are out there?
In the first Trump administration in 2019, his USDA proposed new regulations for when states could qualify for a waiver for the ABOD work requirements. It tightened up some of the requirements, set a floor on the unemployment rate of 6%, meaning that no state or area that had an unemployment rate below 6% could qualify. I think that that's a good step, or that's a step in the right direction in terms of tightening up that criteria.
Can we apply, I mean, I just see we have 50 states and they're all using SNAP in different forms. And is there a way that we can evenly apply this across all states?
The work requirement and the
Yeah,
waiver
work
criteria?
requirements. Yes, yep.
Well, certainly the regulations would have consistent definition or criteria for when a state would qualify for a waiver. If your point is about how do we ensure work requirements are applied consistently,
Yep.
I mean, in the law now, it does have this provision where it can be waived when unemployment is high or when jobs are insufficient. And so certainly you could eliminate that, and so it's just applied across the board. But that's something you'd have to consider in terms of when work requirements are appropriate.
So let me ask you this, and I can ask others this too. To me, there's this important concept that's moving forward across agency lines, and that is artificial intelligence. Is there a way that we can use some artificial intelligence in the SNAP program to make it more effective? Has anybody thought of that? Dr. Rashidi, have you gone down that path? Has this been talked about?
I haven't directly, but I've heard it discussed in terms of program integrity and fraud detection and things like that. Yeah, so I think there's a large, area of study and a lot of people who are working on that, and hopefully that'll continue.
Yeah. Anybody else? Anybody want to talk about that? I mean, to me, this is very important.
Yeah, I think she's exactly right about for program integrity. You know how if your credit card gets hot carded because they think there's something unusual.
That's right.
A lot of that's AI. They do the same thing with SNAP.
Yeah,
and try to figure out is something going wrong here, and if so, we'll go and make sure that nobody's cheating the system.
Yep. Well, and thank you for that. I just think that this is a great avenue as we move forward. I mean, we all have credit cards. This is in essence somewhat of a card like that, and there's technology available, just like you said, through AI that this can be done to create more integrity in the program.
Can I add?
Yep,
but you
absolutely.
need a person to go and check it out, right? The computers aren't going to do it all.
100%. You're right. And when there
highly
is,
skilled person.
Here's the thing: when it's identified, then a person's got to check it out and say, is it real or not real?
Exactly.
Yep. Right. I mean, I think all of us in this room, we want to do what's right, and we see this as an opportunity, as a program that is utilized, that does good things. But for me, it's how do you lift people out of poverty? And that's the whole goal here. Hopefully that's the whole goal of this room, that we can do that. So I thank each one of you for your testimony. Very grateful, and hopefully we can work collectively and get something done. Thank you, Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the young lady from Oregon, Ms. Salinas, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Thompson and Ranking Member Craig, for bringing us together today, and thank you to our witnesses for your time. Before we get started, Mr. Chair, I ask for unanimous consent to enter a letter from multiple veterans organizations opposing cuts to SNAP, including changes such as rolling back the 2021 update to the Thrifty Food Plan, expanding the so-called work requirements, and shifting benefit costs to states into the record.
Without objection.
Thank you. So, as members of Congress, one of the greatest responsibilities is looking out for our nation's veterans. My own father is a two-time tour Vietnam War veteran, and those who have served our country deserve to be treated with the utmost respect and dignity. No one who's ever served our country should wonder where their next meal will come from. Yet, working-age veterans are 7.4% more likely than non-veterans to experience food insecurity, a figure that is even higher for non-white veterans. Across the nation, 1.5 million veterans live in poverty, and 1.2 million use SNAP to be able to afford food. In Oregon, an estimated 33,000 vets receive SNAP each month. That's about 14% of our state's total veteran population, which is the highest in the nation. It is clear SNAP plays a critical role in keeping food on the tables of Oregon veterans and their families. One incredibly important aspect of SNAP as it relates to veterans is the Veterans Time Limit exemption, which was included in the Fiscal Responsibility Act. This exemption allows veterans facing employment challenges due to health conditions related to their service to still access SNAP. Unfortunately, under current law, these exemptions are set to sunset on October 1st, 2030. If we let these exemptions expire, veterans would have yet another hurdle to overcome to be able to put food on their tables. Dr. Schanzenbach, would more veterans face food insecurity if the time limit exemption for veterans was removed?
Yes, it's important to keep that in place. And I believe that Dr. Rashidi's been on the record in favor of removing the veterans'
Time limit exemption. Thank you. What other obstacles, this is back to Dr. Schanzenbach, what other obstacles do veterans face when it comes to food insecurity?
So there are several. One is that there's a relatively low participation rate in SNAP among veterans, and one of the things that can help with that is, I guess, the VA is starting to do screenings for food insecurity and try to help match people together with the benefits that they're entitled to. That's one. Another is really, coming back to the issue of skills, and, if your skills are not a good match for the local economy, you either need to get retraining or something, or find a different outlet.
Location, yeah, thank you. I'm also deeply concerned about Republicans' proposal to pay for tax cuts for Elon Musk and the wealthiest people in our country by forcing states to pay for a proportion of SNAP benefits, in addition to the administrative costs they are already responsible for. Mandating a state cost share for benefits would be a drastic change to the structure of SNAP, resulting in major cuts to benefits and eligibility, and making it near impossible for the program to be responsive during economic downturns. Even a 10% cost share would cost Oregon $150 million next year alone. A 25% cost share would cost my state about $397 million. States are just not in a position to absorb these substantial additional costs. In fiscal year 2024, total tax collections in Oregon were 20% lower than the state's 15-year trend, and nationally, state collections were about 2.8% below their collective long-term trend. I've seen how hard it is for Oregon to scrape together funding for critical infrastructure projects like bridge replacements. Adding hundreds of millions in SNAP funding, in addition to Republicans' planned Medicaid ripoff, would be a devastating blow to Oregon's fiscal future. Dr. Schanzenbach, how could an unprecedented state cost share for SNAP benefits impact the effectiveness of SNAP, particularly for the most vulnerable in our community?
It really would be a radical departure from how this program has been run for more than 50 years to require a state match. So right now, any low-income household that meets the eligibility requirements can get access to SNAP. If we required a state match, not all states could afford that, and so we would see a ratcheting down, potentially, of benefits, of eligibility, et cetera. Now, where this particularly is harmful is when we hit an economic downturn, and then instead of SNAP propping the economy back up and you getting those multiplier effects and restabilizing things, we'll see things continue to spiral down. We should not remove this important tool from our arsenal.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Generally yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Iowa, or from Minnesota, Mr. Finstead, for 5 minutes.
Those are fighting words. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for holding this important hearing today, and thank you for the witnesses for being here and giving of your time for us and with us today. Throughout the last 2 decades, SNAP funding has increased by close to 230%. Meanwhile, food insecurity in this country has remained largely unchanged. The constituents I represent in southern Minnesota would give the shirt off their back to help their neighbors in need. And as members of Congress, we must ensure that they have faith in the program's mission and integrity. SNAP should be a hand up, not just a handout, and it should focus just as much on financial independence and achieving the American dream as it does nutrition independence. So with that being said, Dr. Rashidi, can you tell me what SNAP stands for?
Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program.
Okay, not sole nutrition assistance program, no. Supplemental.
Supplemental.
And I want to point that out because, as we have heard some rhetoric here today from my friends on the other side of the aisle, it's almost presented that this is the sole nutrition assistance program. And just for the record, I want to just state that it is a supplemental nutrition assistance program. And just in the USDA alone, we have other programs The Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infant, and Children, WIC. We have Children and Adult Food Care Program, after-school meals, free breakfast and lunch at school, summer EBT benefits to purchase food when school is not in session, senior food box program, and it goes on, and that's just within the USDA. So I just want to make sure that we kind of have our head around the nature of the Supplemental Nutrition Assistant Program. In your testimony, Dr. Rashidi, you talked about waivers, and that has been an issue that we kind of have seen members from my side my side of the aisle take a very strong position on, and members on the other side have different views on this. Just a couple thoughts that I'd like you to share with us. So, citing the USDA's information, 75% of ABODs on SNAP have no income. And we have seen in your testimony, you've talked about 40% of ABODs currently live under a state waiver of the work requirement. Can you just share some thoughts on that? And I know you've talked about it a little bit in regards to